Now, when I made this clear in the previous video, he made a response that somehow this verse further tightens the noose, around my neck, or showing further that Allah is wrong. I don't know how, because again, this refutes your claim. Your claim was that the Quran wrongly states that the Trinity, it consists of God, Jesus, and Mary.
No, I said you tied the noose tighter around Allah's neck. Call it like it is, Shadid. And my claim is not refuted but confirmed by none other than yourself. And I will keep repeating and reminding you how you confirmed it.
Why doesn't he say, and Mary was just a woman? Jesus was just a messenger, and Mary was just an ordinary woman. If the verse is claiming to deny the Trinity there.
That is the point here. That is the sign that his mother was an ordinary woman, and we know ordinary women give birth to ordinary children.
So since the text does refer to Mary being an ordinary woman, it means that per your own criterion, verse 75 is a refutation of Mary being part of the Trinity, a position that no Christian group ever held. Therefore, even according to your reading, Allah is still wrong.
This verse proves that that is not correct, as we have already shown, and you cannot show. Note where does the text, the actual text of the Quran, show that Mary is part of the Trinity. Now, if you're going to argue that this verse, chapter 5:116, is wrong because it states that Jesus and Mary were taken as gods besides the real God, and you're gonna try to say that that's wrong. Again, if you're going to use that argument that your sect of Christianity doesn't do that, or Christians didn't do that, then let me cut you off right now. Historically, there indeed were groups. You already admitted about the Coloridians. They were obviously enough of an impact that your early church father had to write about them and condemning them for their practices. So obviously such groups of people did exist. And of course, they say that this group died out before the time of Muhammad, but we have proof that this type of worship of Mary continued not only till that time, but even beyond the time of the Prophet. Even in the European Middle Ages, there were large amounts of people who worshipped Mary and attributed divinity to Mary. For example, in the book The Virgin by Jeffrey Ash on page 179, he writes of a 5th century historian by the name of Sozomen who describes Mary as such. He says, a divine power was there manifested and was helpful in walking visions and in dreams, often for the relief of many diseases and for those afflicted by some sudden transmutation in their affairs. The power was attributed to Mary, the mother of God, the Holy Virgin, for she does manifest herself in this way. This is a clear description giving her divinity. We read further in the book, The Virgin, on page 191, where it reads, when a council at Ephesus in 431 implied that Mary could be safely worshipped, crowds burst into delirious celebrations, accompanied by torchlight processions and shouts of praised be the Theotokos, meaning the mother of God. Another story from the book on page 219 illustrates her power and how people looked upon her as a deity that she could be prayed to. For example, it reads, a thief prays to her before going out to rob, and when he is hanged, she sustains him in the air till the hangman acknowledges the miracle and lets him live. A nun who leaves her convent to plunge into vice, but keeps praying to Mary, returns at last to find that Mary has taken her place and no one has missed her. So these are clear examples that even after the time of Muhammad, even into the Middle Ages, people continued to worship Mary in various ways. They could claim that they were just seeking her help, but when you pray to her, when they claim that she has these power to perform these miracles on their behalf, this is clearly giving her divinity and worshiping her. Here's another book that also shows how the devotion to Mary, the worship of Mary, continued way past the time of Muhammad even. The Cult of the Virgin in Anglo-Saxon England by Mary Clayton. It says that the cult of the Virgin Mary is associated by most medievalists with the 12th and succeeding centuries. This book, however, provides a wide-ranging exploration of the cult in England from 700 to the Conquest. Interest in a devotion to Mary flourished in the late 7th and 8th centuries, and especially in the period of the Benedictine reform from the mid-10th century onwards. So don't you dare claim that Allah didn't know what he was talking about because Christians didn't worship Mary and that's not a common. Oh yes, the hell it was a very common and widespread practice, as these books have shown us.
Again, Muslims just keep misrepresenting other people's positions. So where did I say that Christians never worship Mary? Did I ever say this? Are you even listening at all to what I'm saying? Again, the point is that Christians never took Mary as a part of the Trinity. Catholics don't even think she is God. And for this verse to be true, Surah 5 verse 116, you must prove that there has ever been a group in Christian history that worshiped Mary and Yeshua yet excluded the Father. The Coloridians worshipped Mary but did not do so at the exclusion of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit to make her fit into the Trinity. So Allah is still wrong. And Muslims, as evident from the quotes from of Shadid, also stumble over the phrase Mother of God, as if this is talking about Mary being in essence the Mother of God. The term Mother of God has never been understood or even been intended to be understood as Mary being the Mother of God from eternity, but it is only a reference to the birth of Yeshua, i.e. the incarnation. That is why some translate it as the Mother of God incarnate, adding the word incarnate to it to prevent the confusion. And those that use this term often refer to Luke 1 verse 43, where Elizabeth calls Mary the mother of my Lord. Furthermore, the praying to others than God is not only limited to Mary, but also to other saints. Does this make these other saints gods too? No. Mary had a prominent role among the saints, but she was not God or a god. And the term Theotokos literally means God bearer, which doesn't point to Mary's divinity, but to the divinity of the one she bore, meaning the Christ. So the argument still doesn't help Allah. So yes, I can say that Allah didn't know what he was talking about. This is quite evident.
So we see that my reading of 575 is the correct reading.
You think, Shadid? You really think that your reading about 5 verse 75 is correct? How can that be when you constantly contradict yourself? On one hand, you say this is about Mary's vindication. Then you go, it's not about Mary's vindication. It just states a well-known truth. On one occasion, you claim this has nothing to do with Mary being just an ordinary woman. And then you turn around and go, oh, this is about Mary being just an ordinary woman. On one occasion, you say that verse 75 is talking about Christians in verse 73. But then you say, oh, it could be referring to Jews in 68. How can your reading be correct when you can't even make up your mind about who it is and what it addresses? And even if you want to go with your reading of verse 5 verse 116 to justify your reading of 5 verse 75, you have just quoted from a bunch of books about Mary veneration. But which of those books spoke about Mary and Yeshua being taken as two gods and excluding the Father? Because that's what it needs to say for Surah 5 verse 116 to be correct. If it doesn't say it, Allah is still wrong according to your reading in 5 verse 116. Because that's what 5 verse 116 says. Allah didn't know what he was talking about, even if I grant you your reading of Surah 5 verse 116.
Using the principle that all scholars agree is the best tafsir, which is the Quran giving tafsir of itself. As we read from the book, the Sciences of the Quran, an introduction to the science of the Quran, the Arabic is Ulum al-Quran, on page 123 we read, the best tafsir is the explanation of the Quran by the Quran. However, nothing can match the explanation of the Quran by the Quran and the explanation of the Quran by the Prophet. The interpretation of the Quran by the Quran is the highest source of tafsir. Many of the questions which may arise out of certain passages of the Quran have their explanation in other parts of the very same book, and often there is no need to turn to any other sources other than the words of Allah, which in itself contains tafsir. You did not do that. You failed to do that. I have done that, and by me doing so has shown that in another verse it clearly shows that Allah does not take the Trinity to be him, Jesus, and Mary, because when he addresses the idea of Mary and Jesus being taken as gods, he clearly says that they are taken as gods without him, excluding him, not including him. So therefore you cannot claim that any of those verses that are speaking of the Trinity means that the Trinity is him, Jesus, and Mary, because he clearly says that they are taken as gods without him, excluding him.
As we have already seen, your appeal to 5 verse 116 is a farce, and even if your explanation is true, Allah would still be wrong. But Shadid, let's take the Quran to task then, because the Quran explains itself in detail as it says in Surah 41 verse 3 and Surah 6 verse 114. And you keep claiming that the best explanation of the Quran is contained within the words of the Quran itself. Let's see how well the Quran explains itself. Please explain the following things using only the Quran, not appealing to the sources of your scholars. Question number 1. How do I become a Muslim? Where are the instructions in the Quran? Where do I find the Shahada? Question number 2. What is the correct Qibla? How do I pray? What do I do while praying? Question number 3. How many times a day do I pray? Question number 4. Since it is such a big deal to Muslims, do I need to circumcise? Yes or no? If yes, then point me to the verses in the Quran where it tells us about this. Question number 5. When is the Hajj and how do I perform it? Where do I go? Question number 6. Zakat is mandatory. Where does the Quran say that, and how much zakat is required? Question number 7. You believe in the 3 modes of Tawheed, right? Can you show me where I can find this in the Quran? Don't appeal to your scholars. Question number 8. You believe that Muhammad is in the succession of the prophets and is a descendant of Ishmael, and thus linking him back to Abraham. Can you explain or point us to the verse in the Quran where it says that Muhammad is a descendant of Ishmael, which links him to Abraham? See, these are things that you believe, but none of these things are said in the Quran. So I could go on and on about all kinds of things, but I'll leave it here. Fact is that the Quran doesn't explain any of these things. There are no details. You can only know these things by appealing to the sources of your scholars outside of the Quran. But you just fed these scholars to the sharks when you didn't like their exegesis. So go ahead, explain these questions from the Quran only, without appealing to your scholars.